All right, we are recording. Thank you very much, host, for liberating the recording. All right, so we're recording the Zoom. I can send it to you and we can upload it on the various different places. But so the clock's running. How you doing, Jake? Thanks for hosting this thing and letting us know. Today's topic being thoughts on spirituality. So let me know, Jake. What's up?
I'm doing good. I'm glad we were able to finally get together and get this started. Um, so
Halfway
I
started. We're recording. We're not live, but hey, it's we're getting there.
oh yeah, baby steps, baby steps.
Baby steps. So,
So where should we dive into? We've talked about a couple topics when it comes to spirituality. Um, where do you think we should start off with that?
well,
There's a few
this.
few avenues I know we can take.
Well, what avenues are you thinking of, and we can go off of there? Because
Okay.
otherwise, hmm?
What when you say the word spirituality, what is the first thing that comes to mind? Do you think of someone's connection with God, someone's connection with the earth, someone's connection with their own self, or do you think spirituality is more of a selfless thing? Where do you place spirituality? I know it's a vague topic, but
All of the above, actually.
okay.
Um, I would consider different phases of understanding. Like the first video on my channel was that way. Um, but basically, what it's being aware of your spirit first, which means that you're aware of something that's beyond the material, something that's ethereal, something that we can't touch and feel and taste and understand completely. So once we start focusing on that section of our reality, something beyond mind, something beyond consciousness, once we start looking at those points, then it would be, well, that didn't help. Then it would be something akin to spirituality. Um, but just recognizing the existence of it doesn't put us past where the cavemen were. So you have deeper understandings of spirituality to where people today are talking about, a connection to the universe, the connection to Gaia, a connection to another realm, and finding out how that realm interacts and deals with this reality. That's also Buddhism, for example, is spirituality. Mysticism can also be considered a certain level of spirituality. Now, what those bring to you, how they benefit your life specifically, that's to where you have to go up a couple more levels and that sort of thing. And that's to where the spirituality that I'm trying to get to, which is a connection to God, the Father, the Creator, the understanding of who made all this. And the reason that I got to that, or the way that I got to that level, is understanding the material world. That's why I'm so into physics uh, and science and medicine, biology, and that sort of stuff. I'm interested in that because I want to know the world that we live in. But the world we live in was made by someone else. And that someone else already has been trying to talk to us for a very long time. Um, all we have to do is listen. Now, who you're listening to, because once we understand the spiritual realities in the spiritual realm, we see that there are various different sides and interests, and some that are to our favor and some that are not to our favor. And we have to be very careful in our discernment of who we're listening to and what vibes we're going to. And at that point, um, we get back from a spirituality concept down into a psychological and human behavioral and sociological aspect. Because as we find people that resonate with us, that agree with us, we tend to group with them, and our connection is a spiritual connection. So there is a certain level of spirituality there, but that's not necessarily what most people see as spirituality. So it's yeah, it's a vague concept, but I think all of those are different forms that I sort of see that and that sort of thing. Let me adjust the lighting. It's getting dark here. That's why that went. Schizo.
Okay.
All right. So if there's light, the screen, I don't have a green screen. So if there's more light, the system actually sees me better and doesn't necessarily cut me off and blend me into the background because I'm wearing black and it's getting dark. So that's the way it is. Did I hit on the topic that you wanted to touch on, or can any of those rabbit holes we can go down, or what are your thoughts on that? What do you associate spirituality with?
I've always personally reflected it towards my understanding of this planet and my goings on through it. Basically, like my connection with the earth and how my interactions affect the earth as well. I think those things are often misunderstood. I mean, even I think the smallest creature has its own importance, and I think there's a balance in that, and I think that's the understanding of spirituality that I'm trying to come more in terms with, and just understanding myself and the world around me more and my impact on it.
Well, our impact on the universe is exactly what I want my channel to be focusing on, because when you get down to it, we use the term spirituality so that we can judge others, so that we can see who we're going to resonate with, so we can see who we're going to be walking around with and that sort of thing. But in the end, it's not others that matters. It's us. How we interact, how we face the world, how we change what we do. And like you said, well, what's the point? You know, it's deeper. What kind of impact? Now, if we take the materialistic aspect of it, then every individual is a tiny little speck, an insignificant part of a much larger machine. So our impact on it is nothing, which means that you can go running around naked through the streets and do whatever you feel like doing because you have zero impact on this reality, which we know is not true. That's what the system wants us to feel like, and that's why people go nuts sometimes, and they just do some crazy stuff because they think they can, because they don't understand the deeper impact of why we are here. The reason that we were created was to have an impact on this reality. Our resonance, our creative essence has an impact on this reality. We were placed here to care for things. We're here to pastor and, you know, improve. I have the garden and that sort of thing. In fact, then we get into science. How do we interact with the world? Oh, is it by talking to somebody? Is it the words that I say? Is it the actions that I do? But it's different and more constant and more subconscious than that. I like to think of physics like the laws of thermodynamics, right? If you put cold water and hot water together, what happens? It's going to become warm water. Okay. The energy from one is going to be transferred to the other, and they're going to be closer and more approximate one to the other, right? The temperatures are going to get closer together. That's the way that we are. That's the reason why we have to pick our friends. We have to pick the influences that we have, because it has an effect on how we perceive the world and our resonance. Because remember, what I'm trying to establish on my channel and in my book is that Nikola Tesla's interpretation of it is that we're all wavelengths combined in different forms to create the mass that we see. But the mass that we see, that we feel, isn't mass. It's a synthesis of different spinning wavelengths that are held together from different reasons and rules and interactions among themselves. But it's still wavelengths. And so what our interaction is through the reverberations. I can't have the same reaction or I can't have the same effect on you now virtually than what we could if we were sitting in at a table having this same conversation. Because okay, we'd had the body language and other things, other senses that are acting, but the resonance, the energies, we would be able to feel. It's like when you're in a bar and you just feel this. People call it chemistry. Oh, there's chemistry there. There's not any chemistry there. I didn't vibe with that guy at all. And that phrase is vibe with the person because the wavelengths, they ended up canceling each other out instead of adding to each other. When we're able to add to other wavelengths, that's when we both feel better because we both feel more productive. We both feel more powerful because our wavelengths are stronger. And that's on a very small and subtle measurement. It's not visceral. It's not something that just jumps out at you and it's self-evident. No, it's something that we have to understand through many years of understanding, of study. And that's one of the things that, scientists only focus on one aspect. And then the pastors only in focus on another aspect. And neither one of those is anywhere near the reality that most people have. So their input doesn't really have that much of an impact on their lives because, oh, great. Yeah, I love that neighbor. My neighbor's a butthead. He mows the lawn, 6 inches into mine and he keeps throwing the stuff in my house. How am I going to? That is the level that the conversation needs to be at. Okay, where I want to take it to. How do I end up dealing with the stress and frustrations of my day to day, which are different from your day to day, but how we deal with those is the energy that and the impact that we have on the universe. Because like Red Pill says on his show, and then you got Mark Fugel that Marf talks about on his show, that maybe you can make somebody's day better just by being kind and cordial. When I was younger, I didn't think that was important because I wasn't in a good mood, and why should I make somebody else feel good because they haven't done squat to me? So why? But now I understand why not. I still can't smile and be super, chipper around everybody because that's just not the personality that I am. But at the same time, it's thanking people. It's opening doors for people. It's helping people when they don't expect it. It's having that 30 seconds extra in your day to not be rushed around to where you can actually think about the people that are around you. You see somebody that's struggling to get things into their car. Okay, we can't do like years ago to where you just go up there and you help them put the bags because then they'll freak out, call the cops and, tase you or something like that. So you have to get closer to them and go, excuse me, can I help you? It looks like you're having a little bit of trouble there. Sometimes they'll say, no, I'm fine. And that's okay. And you walk off. But at least somebody tried to help, which is not normally the case. In fact, nowadays, nobody even wants to come in contact with anybody else because God forbid you get the CV. And so that's really hammering into our humanity, the reason why we're here. Helping
I really do think that's important. Getting those wavelengths, meeting and I consider getting them close is understanding somebody else's wavelength and understanding their situation that they happen to be in. And then you have these other also negative forces, which are more like getting in an echo chamber and just staying with the people that are resonating on the exact same level with you and not taking more in.
But that's still not, whether the echo chamber is right or left or whatever. One of the things that I've found in echo chambers is that it's easier to insult people when there's nobody to defend the ones that you're insulting. And so what you end up doing is you end up building up a negative structure to where everybody's on a negative resonance. And it's just pure destruction. That's destructive force. That's what they do, whether it's left or right, because they're adamant about destroying the other side. because they're right. And that's
And I
where
think
the
in
deeper
general,
aspect.
I think it's very healthy to question ideas, even your own, whether it's whether it's because you were challenged by somebody else's thought, or they just made you think through your idea and then you thought about it a little bit more through the process. And just like you were saying, either side, it doesn't really matter. There's nothing wrong with you having to unpack the way you feel about something, and that alone is a healthy act. And telling
To understand
yourself
why. The only
exactly.
question that there is in the universe is why. It's the only one that matters. Why? The how and when we're figuring out, but it's the why that we need to always ask. All right, and so we're recording again. Where were we? We were talking about the usefulness of spirituality, how it can actually be useful in our lives. Echo chambers aren't necessarily positive. However, the constant bickering also is not. Now, I worry that we're reaching a stage to where people are not able to see things from another perspective. And I personally have a problem with that, because I will not accept the satanic agenda. I mean, period, the end. That's something that's absolutely contrarian to my view of existence. So there are certain limits, and that's one of the reasons why I don't leave my house in reality. But that's not good either. So the world is much different than when I was a kid. But your thoughts, Jake?
I mean, yeah, I even when I was growing up, I had this conversation with my daughter the other day. She was talking to me about some kind of electronics, and I said, I kind of remember when the internet became a thing. I remember going and getting these free AOL discs, and you would sign in, and I remember playing the sign-in noise that you would hear if you picked up the phone or when you were dialing on to the internet. And was just blown away by yeah, all of that. And it was just a weird thought concept explaining what a beeper is, explaining like and me and my daughter are, I mean, I'm a young father. We're not that many years apart, but it's just wild, the disconnect when it comes to some of the things that got us where we are today. And yeah, it's just excelling at such a rate that I think in just a matter of time, it'll be something unrelatable to the next generation.
Question is how we get from here to there, and what do we lose in the journey?
Well, I mean, the journey itself, right? I mean, if that's what I mean, you're missing out on the experiences that you've already gone through because you can't relate them to other people at this point.
Let's see, a lot of the information, I mean, I'm a walking, I consider myself a walking encyclopedia. I had one of my students call me Professor Google, because I always had the answers to any of the doubts that he had and that sort of thing. Why? Because people couldn't answer my questions, and so I went after the answers. Now I realize that I was asking questions that nobody else really was interested in, nobody else wanted the answers for. So now my answers are useless because they're of little interest to anybody but myself. And that can be slightly frustrating, but it is what it is, I guess. What I want to know is how we can influence this generation, which has completely lost all contact with civility, humanity. They're like, oh, this is right, and everybody else has got to know. That's where the conversation cannot go beyond. Everybody else must. Boom. That right there ends any conversation. Everybody else must. No. And that's the society that we're in right now. Everybody is trying to obligate everybody else to live the way they want to live. And that's not the way any healthy society works. The only way we can really have a healthy society is with the freedom that we had in the beginning. Now, okay, people abuse that, and that's why we pass laws. But what is abuse? I mean, now we got to the point to where 5% of the population defines what the other 95 can actually do. We've gotten to a point to
Well, it's
where
like what we were talking about earlier. It's you have to try to get on that same frequency with people. Otherwise, you're going to have such a disconnect that you're just going to put yourself on spectrums. One side's going to take a side, and the other side's going to take a side, and then there's going to be no middle ground. Everybody just wants to, plant their heels in and not want to meet anybody halfway.
So when that happens, what do you get? You get democracy, which means that 51% define what the other 49 have to do as well. And therein lies the big fucking crux. Okay, because it's not representative, it's mass rule. It's whoever has the most has the most power and people behind them, is going to define how things are done. And historically, we've already seen that doesn't work. I mean, it works when each one is left to their own. Government is there to protect us against people that are abusing. Like we have the big multinational trillion-dollar corporations that abuse everybody around the planet. They abuse people that are buying their products. They abuse the people who are making the products. They abuse the people that are processing everything. Everybody gets abused for some to have a benefit. Oh, it's called productivity. It's capitalism. No, it's not capitalism when 6 families own 95% of broadcasting and everything else. There is no competition. And that's where everything broke down. Because competition is exactly that exchange of ideas. Well, I'm making this product. Oh, I'm making this other product. My product's better than yours. Well, let's find out. You make the product that people want to buy. The problem is that the people are different. And so how do you sell the most to the most people? You go to the most common denominator, the lowest denominator. And what is it marketing has been telling us for 100 years? Sex sells. People need to eat. So food is everywhere. Okay, it's the thing that ties everybody together. But that's what takes us down to our carnality and our material base. That's being stuck in the body. And that's where our greed takes over. That's where our own pride takes over. That's where we end up doing things against other people because we're doing what we want to do, regardless of the consequences to anybody else. Therein lies the problem. And that's a problem in communism, capitalism, socialism, any ism that you want to put in. The basic problem is when I want to impose my will on somebody else, or I don't care who gets hurt for me to get what I need to get. And that's where the problem lies. And the reason that I went through all my searches of different religions and everything else, and I came back to my base core of Christianity, is because that's what really makes society work, is whenever we respect, okay, I have an opinion, you have a different one, fine. At the end of the life, each one gets to figure out. In the meantime, I'm not going to tell you how to live. I'll recommend it. I can't be around you if you're doing certain things because, that's just, I don't do, but you go ahead and do you. Okay. That's what works. If somebody doesn't accept you, then turn your back, brush the dust off your feet, and continue on your journey. And that's kind of like cancel culture, but it's not the same. It's not getting everybody to cancel one person that you don't like. It's you don't like that situation. You walk away. You don't like a radio station? You change the radio station. You don't call up the cops to shut down the radio station because you didn't like, the guy that was talking that half hour, because you're taking away the rights of everybody else. You don't like it, you turn it off. You don't like somebody's conversation, turn away. Now, will you ever be able to talk to them? Yeah, probably not. Now, here's where the short-sightedness of it is, and especially in my case, I tried not to burn bridges, but I ended up burning them anyway, just because people don't agree with me. And people have a tendency to have to be agreed with. I don't. People have their own different opinions, and I respect that. I know that. I mean, I've spent my life in 3 different cultures, so I know people have different opinions, and I have the right to mine. But everywhere I'm at, it seems like I don't have the right to my opinion. Um, and that's why I am where I am. But the problem is that in order to work and to thrive and to do things in society, you have to have interaction with others. And if others don't agree with you on fundamental things like don't mess with me, I won't mess with you, you don't go forward, which is why I'm stuck teaching English classes or translating from Portuguese to English, or doing some innocuous thing that people can just toss off to the stranger. Because unfortunately, that's most cultures have that. They prefer their own. They prefer people that are more like them, that resonate more with them. You see a bunch of white people together, you say they're racist. Why? They resonate, they have the same. Does that mean they don't accept somebody else? No, not necessarily. But if you see a bunch of black people walking around, you call them racist? Oh no. Do you call them a gang? Well, that would be racist. No, they're just people that resonate, and so they're around each other. If you see a group of Mexicans or a group of Indians or something like that, are they? No, they're just people that have similar resonance. They agree with each other, and they walk around because it's a friendship that fortifies their perception of their reality. That's okay. Problem is when those try to impose their will on others. When this group tries to burn down that building, or that group tries to torch that other person, or that group tries to throw people off a cliff, or that group over there tries to, you can't do this, or you can't come here, or you can't. Who decides? Us, our group. We're bigger than you, so we decide what you can do. That, in its essence, is wrong, no matter the race, no matter the religion. The second that you impose on others, you're wrong, period. Because the base essence of existence is free will. This entire holographic theater was put together for the one and only reason of free will. God gave us consciousness, God gave us free will, and God gave us a world to play in. Okay, as long as we play by his rules. Somebody else had a different idea on that, and that's why we're still in serious problems up to today. But free will was the essence. The only way that you can have free will is if you can choose to do something that's contrary to the established things, right? Outside of this existence, God's will is absolute. The only thing that you can do is what's in his will. Why? Because his will is for the benefit of everybody. His will doesn't, it's for us to build up and be better and that sort of thing. So to have free will, we have to do things that are imperfect, and imperfect is a sin, and that the karma and the justice aspect has to be maintained. Yeah, we're all going to be judged, and we're all going to be found wanting, because all of us have had free will. But for that to exist, there had to be a way to compensate for it. And the guy who made all of this had and created the compensation, but it had to be through free will as well. He asked his son, look, son, you want to do this, but it's going to cost, it's going to hurt, but you're willing to do that. All right, let's do that. And so he set it up from the very beginning. This universe was created through the lens of Jesus. That is the only way that we have free will, is because of his sacrifice. Now, the fact that we don't recognize that is a very big problem for us, not for him. I mean, if my computer program decides to recognize me as its user, fine, I'll just shut off the computer program and I'll be fine. I still got lots of other stuff to do. And that's this reality. Once this reality says, nah, we don't need you, he'll say, fine, bye. And he'll wrap it all up and throw it in the garbage. Why? Because he's done, and it doesn't affect his reality. He continues on, and we're the ones thrown into the garbage. Okay. It's like amoebas not recognizing the host that they're in, or whatever. It's just ludicrous. So this entire reality was created for us to be able to have free will. But the best and most fantastic expression of our free will is to do what he wants us to do, which is serve others and be good to others. Now, is that easy? No.
Let me dive into that thought with you for a second.
Please. I've been talking too long.
Oh, no, you're fine. His idea for us is to follow his direction, correct?
He gave us directions for our own benefit.
Okay. And would you consider okay, let me play devil's advocate a little bit. Do you consider yourself an Old Testament Christian or a New Testament Christian, or you understand Christianity as a whole?
Christ came to fulfill all of the rules written in the Old Testament, and he will come at the end of the New Testament to finish off what he started in the beginning, which is why he says he's the Alpha and the Omega. He is always the same. He is unchanging. Okay. There is no modification to perfection. Otherwise, it would not be perfect.
Because we were talking earlier about levels of spirituality, and I like to understand people's levels of spirituality, especially when it comes to Christianity. There's some Christians, like we had talked about earlier, that say they're Christian and haven't been to church in 20 years. There's some that have different levels of, maybe they feel they're close with their God in a different way. But I also think there's a lot of people that have a disconnection with the Bible itself. And one of the things that got me disconnected, because I grew up with Christianity. I went to church camp when I was younger, and I was raised in a Christian church. And I don't remember if it was about 14 or 15. For some reason, I was strange. When I was younger, I always wanted to have a daughter. I wanted kids at a really young age, and turns out it eventually worked.
At 8, I knew I wanted kids.
Yeah, I'm not sure why, but it was just something that clicked with me. And there was a story in the Bible. What was that?
It's called the Spirit.
Oh, gotcha.
It's him guiding you to your better self.
Well, and this is internally where I had the most conflict. Is I was reading a story in the Old Testament about a person named John Locke, and that he was my big disconnection with the Bible. Basically, he was in the towns of Sodom and Gomorrah back in
Lot. Okay.
Lot. No, I might have pronounced it wrong. Sorry about that.
No, it's just you put John and Locke together, and so I had a different association, and that's Victorian and problematic. In the book of John, the story of Lot in Sodom and Gomorrah. Okay, you said that he offered his daughters to protect the angels, correct?
Yeah.
That was your big problem with that.
That was my big disconnect. I know when I've heard it explained, it was a blind faith that you had to have in God. Well, and it wasn't that he.
No.
He did not ask.
No. He wasn't offering the daughters to them like that. It was a different interpretation. You got to understand the cultural norms of where he was. Okay, think about Evergreen and the 17th letter movement and, the saved children. Why? Because within that belief system, the kids are used and abused. That's why they had lots of them, so that they could actually care for one while the other ones were thrown to the wolves, literally. That was the culture of Baal. That was the culture of the adversary. That's the culture of Nimrod. That's the culture that the demons push on the world, which is why it's back in so much force today. Okay? Because it's Nimrod, it's the adversary, it's that demon of chaos, murder, and consumption that guides their essence, because it is their reality. That is their spirituality. Their spirituality is to get in touch with the demon realm and find out as much as they can from these demonic beings. Now, there's
Well, even for me, even stories like Daniel,
now
it
they were
was
they were in the middle of that
God was
culture, which is
asking.
why they offered it.
Well, it seemed like God was asking for that blind faith, not personally. He didn't actually ask Lot to do that. Lot did it
He asked
with
Abraham for that faith.
yes, yeah.
Because my problem was Abraham going up there and sacrificing Isaac. But at the
Mm-hmm.
instant that he was going to do it, God told him to stop. And at that instant, a goat ran out of the bushes. God will provide. Okay. He doesn't require it, he doesn't ask for it. From the time of Abraham on, I can guarantee you he quite rebukes it. Our children are the most precious thing we have. Whenever people were around Christ and the children wanted to come up and the people said, no, 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 stay out, stay out. This is adult time.
It just
This
seems
is
like that reward
adults
system
are
of
talking
it.
about philosophy. You're not in here. And Christ said, no, bring them up. They have to know this as well, because it's the essence of the soul that you want to show that constructive and positive and peaceful existence and perception of the reality that he created. That's the way that it best functions. Now, what we have found out is that it functions really well for a few. If they don't follow that, that doesn't function for everybody. That's why the system that we have now, we have trillionaires. How the fuck do you have trillionaires and people that are dying of hunger if the system's supposed to be working? And the only reason that China didn't do that is because they killed off, a couple 100 million people. All right,
Well,
so
getting back on the monopolization of businesses, I uh,
that's
I do
greed.
think
That's
really
nowhere in the Bible. Actually, the Bible tells us against that. The Bible also
yeah.
tells us against usury,
But
which is charging interest on loans. So the banks are
I
wrong
mean,
right
and
there.
that draws back to what we were talking about earlier with levels of spirituality. Yes, gluttony is one of the main sins, but most people still have AC in their house.
Most people have what?
Air
AC.
conditioning, AC, air conditioning.
You in the US you have to have AC in order to live. Otherwise you'll just uh, people die from overheat.
I agree, but keeping your house at a moderate 70 degrees 7 or 8 months out of the year is a different level of survival. It's not survival. I'm trying to enjoy myself while I'm here. That's why I mean there's levels to it. That's why there's
Yeah,
Amish there's
but that's
Amish
that's
people
a first.
that
But
will
you're
not have
but,
that.
but Jake, you're
And they
talking about
survive.
first
They
world
don't die
problems.
because of that.
That's a first world problem.
Yeah.
The world's not going to end because you decided to stay at 73 degrees versus 85 because your impact on energy costs. No. Now,
But if all sins are equal in that sense,
yeah, as soon as you're focusing on yourself, you are consuming electricity that can be used for someone else. You are consuming your money that could be used for something else. You are consuming your time being stuck indoors to do something else. Now, if the air
and
conditioning keeps you
even
from,
our food, like you were just saying, even our food, like you were just saying, how many? Well, I mean, I'm American. I don't know if you're not
yeah, I
American.
spent 20 years in the States, man. I know American culture.
Oh,
I
okay.
grew up in that shit. Okay, that
So
that
yeah,
was
watching people throw away food, watching people waste Just
My
common way.
grandmother was a farmer in Oklahoma, and she always told me, eat all your food because there are children going hungry in Africa. And I was thinking, what does my food here have to do with Africa? But I still clean my plate every day, and I teach my kids to do the same thing. Okay. Um, Problem is the consumer attitude, the restaurants. People throw away food because the restaurants want more money. They give you a bigger serving so they can charge you more because they have to have the tips and all that kind of stuff. And so people also feel better, more privileged, more empowered if they can actually throw away. The Chinese themselves, if you want to be a good guest, then you need to leave something on your plate for your host to know that he gave you more than you needed, which is exactly the opposite of what I was brought up to wear. Why? Because in China, if you clean your plate, they'll bring you some more food because that means you're still hungry. So different ways of seeing life and seeing
Is
things.
it the Chinese culture that also has the interesting custom of slurping because it shows a sign of approval when you're eating?
Burping.
Okay.
Burping is kudos to the chef.
But yeah, I've heard slurping on soups and stuff like that as well.
That I don't know. In fact, I think they don't like the slurping, but I don't know. I'm not Chinese, so I can't really say. Those two things I have read, heard, and had dialogues on. So those two that I mentioned, I do know. But the slurping thing, no, I have no idea about that. But what you're talking about is the gluttony of the U.S. because we want to feel, the benefit of busting our ass all day. So what's the benefit of, sacrificing a third of your life to somebody who doesn't give a shit about you? It's being able to go home and at least be comfortable. So that's where it all started. Remember, the American dream 100 years ago was a car in the garage and a chicken in every pot. They didn't talk about 5 pizzas, 2 or 4 hamburgers, and 15 bags of chips and 3 liters of Coke. It was a chicken in a 4 or 5 person household. That's a chicken. Now, on Sundays, what I do is I go and I get the roast chicken from a restaurant, and the 4 of us sit down and we basically gobble up a chicken on our own. So yeah, that means people being fed, people having transportation, people having a roof over their heads. Those are the basic necessities of life. And many people at that time didn't have those basic necessities. They didn't have a roof. They didn't have a form of transportation. And many were eating beans to survive, which is why Americans dislike beans so much, because it reminds them of their poor age. Whereas in Mexico and in Brazil, people love the beans. They think it's a culinary treat. It's packed with minerals and vitamins and everything else. And it's just a wonderful fruit that can give you lots of things that you need to survive. That being said, we went from we need to do the things we need to survive to make sure that everybody can survive to everybody has more than they ever really needed, and we can consume a quarter of the world's production and throw it all away because it doesn't really matter because we can. That is where the dream of a decent life for everyone became distorted to me having a great life for me. And it's part of the marketing. It's part of the propaganda. I mean, who wants to watch a commercial that tells everybody to be kind to each other? No, but seeing a commercial to where, somebody's being a victor and they strived and all that, at least that's where it used to be. Now, you've got a military recruiting advertisement that's a cartoon of a girl being raised with her 2 moms and finding a niche to prove herself in the army. I don't think that's going to instill very much fear in the adversaries. opposing militaries are going to look at that and they're going to laugh and they're going to say, great, we can have our way with the entire army because that's the way they all think. There's a reason why those perspectives and personalities were taught against, because it not only weakens you physically, it weakens you mentally, it weakens your soul. Humanity has to exist, has to defend itself, it has to coexist with things that want to kill us. And so there is a necessity, and your assessment of the difference between Old Testament Christianity and New Testament Christianity is because of the things that God told people to do back in those days. But you got to remember, these were people that were eating their own young. These were people that were generating giants. This entire line had to be eliminated lest you have problems in the future, because that genetics is going to always create the same problems because they come from a rotten seed. That's what he was trying to prevent. The problems that we have today are because we didn't fully implement his word back then. Okay, and he was telling that for our benefit. And so there's no mercy in the Old Testament. Yes, there is. And it's all over the place. Problem is there's also justice. Okay, that's the thing that most people don't want to face. Because, justice is blind. It only sees what you do and the price that has to be paid for it. And most people can be extremely brutal and bitter with other people, to the point to where you've got girls committing suicide because they were harassed on social media by 15 different girls, and nobody finds a problem with that. We have an entire society angry at a cop because he shot a black woman that was wielding a knife. Because, teenagers have knife fights. Why the fuck do teenagers have knife fights? That is not normal. That is something but it's the level of anger and it's the level of disrespect. Now, why did that chick want to stab the crap out of the other chick? I guarantee you that chick in pink had her mouth whacking the whole time, egging it on. And the girl simply snapped. Now, the consequence of her snapping is that she's now dead. Okay. But the consequences to the girl that made her snap, none. No consequences whatsoever. Because, it's just bullying. That's normal.
Well, I
No.
mean, I don't think it's normalizing bullying as much as also there's a
They don't even mention it.
level
They don't know.
of
They don't go into why that girl wanted to stab the other one. And that's what I'm telling you. The only question that you need to ask is why. Why was her dad kicking the crap out of somebody on the ground in front of a cop? They're so angry that they lose focus, that the person that's there to help them, because they're the ones that called, they've completely lost it. They are so consumed by the anger that they can't think straight. And that's what happens. But what led them?
Why do we let these things of these external forces affect what we consider self-esteem? Self-esteem is how you feel about oneself. There's no reason you should let people bring you down to a level where you need that anger in your life or you need any of that. So I don't think the comments online should affect you. You shouldn't be reading them if they affect you in that way. I don't.
But remember the age of the people that we're dealing with. You and I say this, the same thing that our parents told us about, sticks and stones will break my bones, but words will never hurt me. Words do hurt. And words do affect your self-esteem. Why? Because we are social creatures.
But don't you think there's a level of allowance with words to hurt you? Because I don't feel like words themselves can hurt you unless you give them the power to.
It's resonance the same way as me punching a fist through your nose.
Well, if somebody's sitting there calling you a name, are you going to sit there and listen to them, or are you going to walk away? Or are you going to entertain the fact that they're going to sit there and pick on you and you're going to let it get to you more and more?
I usually just get up and but that's my mistake. That's why people say that I'm intimidating, because I don't put up with that bullshit. They want to make fun of me, fine. that's a verbal aggression. I'm ready to take it to the next fucking level. Because
I consider myself
with American football and all the other stuff, the karate and the kung fu and all the other shit, I've got no problem with taking it to the next level, and that's where most people buckle, and that's where the problem ends. But the problem doesn't end there, because the coward just cowarded, and behind my back, they're getting together with others to make my life a living fucking hell. Whereas the best answer and the most mature answer would be simply to get up and walk away. However,
I mean, me
why am I
personally,
leaving the environment
hold
where
on
I
one
was?
second. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, that's just yeah, okay, get up and walk away. Yeah, that would be the most specific answer to that. But you're always giving ground to the people who are angry and willing to spit out verbal abuse. And my problem is that those people spitting out verbal abuse, I don't care who the fuck they are, they can't be doing that shit. And they ain't going to be doing it to me or mine. Because spitting out a bunch of verbal abuse is the same thing as grabbing, not the same thing as grabbing it, because physical damage is permanent. However, people don't understand the psychology and the fact that we are resonant beings. Words are vibrations. And there are times to where people say things that they don't even realize, and you just heard off the cuff, but it's something, a part of a conversation that you're not even, just part of it you ended up hearing. And that part you end up going through your mind. And yes, those are internal problems. Those are the things that each individual should focus on, not feeding. It's like there's an old saying that says, the old man told the child that, there are two wolves in the world. The good wolf and the bad wolf. And the kid said, well, which one is going to win? He says, the one that you feed the most. So if you're feeding the ideas of self-doubt and everything else, then, you're lending ear to them. But on the same token, if you're only listening to the people that tell you good things and you don't recognize any of the problems in your perspective and your personality, you'll end up running over people like a steamroller and causing a lot of damage because you're not willing to listen to anybody who doesn't agree with you. See, so there's whenever you look at the middle ground, it's always okay. It's at the extremes to where we see where things break down.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Words can't hurt us, but at the same time, why are people being that mean?
Well, and that's the thing. I think it's sometimes it's because of an individual's own insecurities. And for me, I consider myself a mixed martial artist in the sense that I know if I needed to, I could defend myself. I'm not keen looking for a fight, but I'm happy to jump into one if it presents itself. Like it's
because I got no problems with the results. I've been on the losing end and I've been on the winning end. I know how it ends, but the other guy has no idea. And that first punch, if they're not ready for it, if they're not used to it.
Yeah, it makes a big difference. And that's what I mean. I will let people run their mouth if they feel like it makes them feel better, because when they leave the situation, it's not going to help them. If they wanted to jump into a physical altercation, it's definitely not going to help them. And if I can walk away from the situation, I try to on the most cases. But yeah, I mean, there's few cases where you actually have to have a physical altercation because somebody's pushing it to that point. But nowadays, I have to.
I've never had to be honest with you, because they usually back down.
One and not a weapon one. I have to hope that it's not a weapon rather than a physical altercation. Most people aren't keen to fighting anymore. Most people
nowadays, yeah. Let's say you're into a fisticuffs and the guy pulls a knife. Okay, so you got a knife in your boot because you're ready, and you pull out the knife in your boot, and the guy next to him pulls out a pistol and says, "I don't think so." At what point do we stop? And that's where this keeps escalating higher and higher and higher. And without that initial peace ideology, the problem is that why are these people running their mouths? What makes them feel that they can or have to run their mouths to the denigration of somebody else?
Because no one slapped them when they were younger.
Thank you very much.
I mean,
Exactly.
honestly, that people have never, if you haven't been put in your place at any point in life by anyone, whether it was male, female,
You're going to
anyway,
run your fucking
everybody
mouth.
has the ability to do that to you. And everybody has the ability to make their words powerful. It's just how you choose to take them.
People run their mouth because they've never got it slapped before. Okay.
Mhm.
Because it's always comfortable. And so, oh, no, 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 no. Be careful. You know, that there's, um, and that is the problem in the society that we have today. People have had it too easy.
I was always taught you're never the biggest baddest guy out there that you think you are, or biggest baddest person that you think you are. There's always somebody bigger and badder, and you're going to run into them at some point.
Oh yeah.
And that's something I've always lived by. And that's why I don't consider myself an aggressor in the sense of violence, just because there's a chance that somebody could be more trained than I am or something like that. And I don't wish for that, but if it happens to occur, then something I'll deal with at the time. Most of the time when I see people that are more aggressive, I know that they don't have that same mindset as me and consider themselves a martial artist. They think they're a tough guy that's going to go out and hasn't been slapped before. And they need to be by somebody.
Yep. But again, that's imposing our viewpoint and perspective and will on others. Um, it's just the verbal abuse and the abuse in general has gotten so bad and so allowed by society. Go ahead. All right,
Close it up.
recording again. So I was rambling on and on about people not respecting or understanding others. And then you tell me a story about a dog that started a fire. People not respecting the dog's needs and that sort of thing. So there are levels of the spirituality to where we even have to understand the dogs. I mean, I've got a pet bird. Okay, it's a wild bird, but it feels comfortable here, and so it's now my pet bird. It shows up every day for food. Walks around here and craps in the area and that sort of stuff. So being understanding of others, not just people, but other creatures and other things that are interacting with us in this reality, because we are here to care for all of them. We're not here to use them at our discretion and at our will. Okay. We're here to make things better for everyone, them and us included. So whenever we have half a pizza left over and we throw it in the garbage, well, there might be a homeless guy that needed, a couple of slices to actually make it through a cold night. Whenever you're throwing away, just tons and tons of plastic stuff and garbage and everything else, because after all, it goes to the landfill, right? Or wherever it goes, we don't care as long as it's not in our home. So we ended up generating things that are not necessarily beneficial for the entire planet. In fact, there's an entire continent floating in the Pacific that is composed of the plastic that we threw away.
I've
Now,
seen that. It's interesting.
it's huge. Now, the thing is this, are we going to limit everybody's use of plastic? No, it starts with ourselves. For example, I try and use as little as I can. I have a nice garden. Why? Because I focused on having the trees for the oxygen, because each person has to have at least 6 square feet of green in order to generate the oxygen that that person needs and to consume the carbon dioxide that we breathe off. Okay, so we are carbon negative from the outset because we're breathing out carbon dioxide. So if we have plants around that will absorb our carbon dioxide, that reduces our personal footprint. Okay. It also reduces, I have air conditioning in all the rooms in my house, but I don't have them on. One, because there's the electricity down here in Brazil is just too damn expensive. Two, that I designed the windows to where if it's a hot day, I open up 2 or 3 windows that are in the right place and I get a breeze that comes through, and it's almost as good as air conditioning. In the wintertime, it doesn't get that cold here, but let's say it gets down to what, 45, 50, 45 degrees. It's not cold, but it's cold enough. So we
Gotta
sleep
lucky.
with two blankets. You know, it's not the freezing cold weathers of the tundra in the US, you know, New York, Chicago, that Wisconsin, you know, Minnesota.
I
That
think
stuff's just brutal.
I've had minus 32 before. We've thrown water outside and it froze before it hit the ground.
Yeah.
Our
I don't
winters
have a
are
problem with my pipes freezing. That's definitely not a problem that I have. So different realities require different levels. And so what I do here isn't possible there. But that's actually one of the reasons why I'm here, why I'm still here. Because I've been here for 20 years and this wasn't the place that I thought I was going to retire or grow old in. It was, you know, be here for a while and then get back to the real world in the States. Um, One, the States changed. Two, I changed. Three, I'm not necessarily, I don't know what I'd be able to do in the States. I'm pushing 50. Um, you know, and so there's a lot of questions that get there in the middle. But one of the reasons why I stayed here is why, because existence was not as brutal as what it was there. That allows me the freedom to be able to focus on my dog, my kids, the birds, um, reducing my carbon footprint. I have solar water heaters, so I don't have to, you know, spend too much, but I still heat up my hot water with gas because my kids prefer the hot water tank. We also have the things that they use here in Brazil is out of your shower, you have a water heater that's connected to your shower head and it's electric. So, you know, you're getting, how do you change the temperature in that? Well, it's more or less water. If you want it colder, you turn the water up so that the resistance can't heat it up as fast. And so it's a little bit cooler. Or if you want it real hot, you put it a little bit lower water so the resistance heats it up a lot and you get that. It's not the same.
They
And
got
you
new
feel
ones.
it different as when you have hot and cold water and you're mixing them to the temperature that you want. It's a different reality. And yeah, I did that here because I'm spoiled. I like the US way of taking a shower. You know, it's where I mix the water, the temperature that I want. It's kind of selfish, yeah, I guess, but at the same time, I don't see how that's necessarily damaging the planet. No.
They got new ones now, Michael, that you should look into when you get a chance. And they're done by magnets. It's conductive energy is used to heat it rather than electric energy. And
Nice.
so they use them on trailers and they call them instant hot water because as soon as it goes through magnetic energy, it heats it up and it gets the molecules moving and gets them to the temperature that you want. And it's
Yeah,
almost instant.
they're finally tapping into Tesla's perception of reality versus Edison's perception of reality. Okay, so that's a good thing. The world's going in a good direction, and yes, people are more spiritual than what they were before. They recognize the spiritual realm more than they did before. Do they understand it? I'm not sure because we're not seeing the results of their spirituality in their actions. You can
Do you
judge
think
a fruit.
anybody
You can judge a tree by its fruit.
do you think anybody can fully understand it, the spiritual realm?
One already has because he made it and he tried to explain it to us. And if we read the red words, when I was in college, one of the times that he made me focus on the red words because that goes beyond all the fluff and the perceptions and the interpretations of this writer or that writer or the other writer. It's the words from the architect himself. And so whenever you see those, and the more I understand about quantum physics and the resonant universe and everything else, the more his words actually make sense. The more I look into the multiverses and life on other planets, the more his words make sense because he isn't the God of this world. He's God of the universe. Everything, all of them, all the alien beings. Now, there are some aliens that say that the universe is God. Now, God created the universe. However, God is in the entire universe because it's his essence that holds everything together. Quantum mechanics has actually told us that you need to have consciousness in order for things to actually be physical. And so Einstein had a debate with Niels Bohr But yeah, so if consciousness creates reality, then if I'm not looking at the moon doesn't exist. Is that it? No, it requires consciousness. Yes. The consciousness that's required is God's. He is
So,
constantly thinking about us lest we cease to exist.
so if the singular God that you're referring to created created the universe that we exist in, is there a possibility for other intelligent life in this universe?
Oh, yeah. In fact, Jesus already told us he has
And
sheep in other pens that he has to attend to. And he
yeah,
goes to their planets and appears in their flesh form.
do you think they got a version of Jesus as well, another
Yes,
son of God?
yes.
Because that really interests me. If there is a malevolent being that um whether it be multiple religions are referring to, or because I think it's always interesting to dive into the flood mythology of religions. And I don't mean to call it mythology, the flood stories of religions,
Thank you.
and talk about the fact that there's a reoccurring theme that seems to happen in a lot of religions with a flood story and a clearing of the planet, and um, just a way of doing things, whether it came from the Sumerians, whether it came from the new Christian version of it,
It's
whether it came
different
from,
perceptions of the same truth. And that's the thing.
yeah.
Because you
So,
can't, I mean, I had
so
teachers that
are you
denied the
convinced?
flood happened. It wasn't global. Yes, it was global.
Well,
Why did it happen? Again,
do you think it's possible that the Christian interpretation of what happened with God and all of that was a interpretation of the Sumerian version as well? Like, you think it's an evolved understanding, or do you think it is something that was just understood way later and the people that predated it didn't understand it?
all right, there throughout my journey of searching for certain truths, yes, that the story of Gilgamesh, Nimrod, Sumerians came up throughout that because that predated the Hebrew text itself. So many want to say that that influenced the Hebrew text. What I would like to mention is that both were talking about the same reality, but from different perspectives. Because the ones that influenced the Sumerians were the ones that God warns us about. Okay. Um, those that left their original dwelling. Now, are all aliens evil demons? No, not necessarily. But those that left their dwelling, those who wanted to come on among us, that wanted to do our things, those do not have our best wishes in mind. And they came here to interfere in this reality and to make it their own. That is the problem. Now, the Sumerians who taught the Egyptians, who taught the, what are now considered the hidden texts of, these guys, right? The hidden knowledge and all that kind of stuff. Well, it's not necessarily beneficial, and we're seeing that today because their overall agenda is 500 million people on the entire planet. Okay, we have 7.5 billion people. That means 7 people have to go. How? Well, we're seeing it. We don't believe it or understand it because it goes against what our essence, our soul tells us is good. And what is good is not killing people in mass, which is what they're doing. Good isn't abusing other people's rights of obligating them to stay at home, to do things that they would not normally be willing to do. That is not beneficial, and that's not coming from a good place. And since it comes from a bad place, along with the bad place influence also comes the lies, because the bad place knows that the only way for you to follow that path is for them to lie to you, which is why this last year they've lied about just about fucking everything. Yay or nay?
What's your interpretation of the biblical story of the Garden of Eden and the serpent itself, the serpent as being its own entity. And
Ooh,
do you take the biblical text more literally as it was a snake, or do you think of it as more of a sorry, I'm not getting the right word, philological story of um, what they were trying to depict to the reader? Like,
no,
do you
physical, real, physical and real.
so do you think that do you consider the serpent a evil creature? Do you
Yep.
think reptilians are an evil creature, or
Cold-blooded. There's a reason why we call people cold-blooded killers, because they don't have compassion, they don't have love, they don't have the feelings and understandings that we have, because it's all about them. They are pure feral beings. Now, different interpretations are that we have the lizard brain in our mind, that the monkey brain developed around that. And so we still have our primordial essences. And that's what they're philosophically trying to talk about, is that those primordial levels of the evolution of the brain. It can be that as well, but it comes from a physical, real situation to where you had a guy lying his ass off and convincing people to do what they shouldn't be doing. And from that point, it's continued on. For example, the Nimrod, the story of Ishtar and all that kind of stuff. That was also a lie from a whore. The woman cheated on her husband. He ended up dying. And then later on, she says, "Hey, he left. He came back and he inseminated me after he was dead, and so this kid is, the sun god Ra." That was steeped on lies, and you can't have something that's truthful that's based on lies, and that's the problem that we see in that church in the boot-shaped country. You know which one I'm talking about? They start off and they've been built up on many, many, many lies to cover up the power corrupts. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. And this entity had absolute power over a good portion of the planet for many, many years. And to cover up their corruption and to cover up their greed, they planted lies and more lies and more lies on top of more lies. That's why you can't trust the people that are telling you the things. You have to go back to the word. The word is a living word of God. Okay. The reason that I have print versions is because if it's in a digital format, it can be changed. It can be altered. They're doing it today. They're taking words out of it. They're changing different words because they don't like the meaning. And if you have a problem with the translation, there are the Septuagint, which is from the original Hebrew, which is also in the original Greek, which is also in the original languages in which they were written, the most ancient ones that we can find. And yes, there's some people that are reinterpreting it in some different ways. This little word meant this something else. And yeah, each different interpretation and expansion on the definition of words we can see differently. However, that doesn't take from the larger message, which is usually the same. Why? Because he gives us the same message in 5, 6 different ways and in thousands of year intervals. Okay, always the same message, because God is eternal, Alpha, Omega. He is unchanging. He is love and compassion. Now, what changes is our interpretation of it, our perspective of it, depending on our reality.
So trying to understand the interpretation of the Bible, if these creatures are bad, these serpents are bad, and we have what we considered the fallen angels. They can be classified in a lot of other terms.
Yeah.
But these fallen angels, is it almost a demon possession on these other beings, these reptilians, and they're or are they influencing them?
They are the
And
reptilians.
They are the reptilians?
Yep.
So they just continue on living through these beings, or
Now, what happened,
longevity?
what you're talking
How did they
about
get
is
it?
a
How did they
slightly
get a
different
physical
situation.
body? Well, I feel like they were representing a physical form at some point, and I wonder what physical form that was, whether it was a snake, whether it was, and that's why I wonder the Bible's interpretation of the serpent, and if it could have been a misinterpretation that the serpent may not have been a bad thing, or if it was these were two, because I've heard a lot of speculation, even on Ancient Aliens, they talk about the Anunnaki and they talk about the serpent beings, and it was just an interpretation of the events taking fold, whether it was these reptilians were perceived as snakes because of the style of their skin and scales. And then if you look at like the Mayan civilizations and some of the Aztec civilizations, they had connections with the snake and the serpent. And I don't
The winged
necessarily.
snake.
What's that?
The winged snake was Quetzalcoatl, which was the god of the Maya.
Okay. And then you look at Chinese culture with the dragon, and I don't
Also
necessarily.
a winged serpent.
Yeah, I don't necessarily always have a winged serpent as being a negative entity, but I do have it interpreted as one in the Christianity.
Have you ever seen a good dragon?
I haven't seen any drag.
Okay. In any movie that you've seen depicted, have you ever seen a dragon depicted as a good guy?
Yeah.
And he's usually the exception to the others.
I mean, yeah, I mean, Pete's dragon.
Puff the Magic Dragon was an exception to.
There's a few I could think of offhand, but
Okay.
to train a dragon, there's a few good ones in that one.
Oh
Mostly
yeah,
Disney.
yeah, true. My son loved all three of those movies. I've watched them as well, but that's a modern interpretation of it.
Dragon, the original Pete's Dragon gets me every time.
Yeah, Puff the Magic Dragon. Yeah.
There you go.
But those are modern interpretations. They're trying to put a nice face on something that's not necessarily nice, because it has no reason to be nice. Now, as far as the possession and everything else, we have to go back to the Book of Enoch, okay? Because the ones from whom the heavens came, Anunnaki, according to the Sumerians, or those whom those who came, who fell from heaven, the fallen angels, the fallen ones, the Nephilim, in the Hebrew text. Now, those Nephilim had kids, and this is where we see in the Book of Enoch the reason that they left their first abode.
Do you consider these to be the giants, the Goliaths of their time, the larger humans?
Goliath was in that genetic line. And what happens is that there were giants in the land in those days. Text directly from Genesis 6, also from Enoch and everything else. But
most Christians don't recognize that. That's why I ask. Most Christians definitely don't recognize that. And that just shows a better understanding of your view of Christianity. You look at it as a whole and an understanding of a story. And I like that, an understanding of, that religion.
The context in which it was placed in. Now, let's think about it this way. Actually, let me finish the story. They came to Earth because they liked Adam's seed. And so they enjoyed seeing what we were doing, and they wanted to be able to do the same thing because they don't have that ability.
Okay. And mated with mortal man.
Yep. And what happened was they created the giants. Now, as they were getting older and some of their kids were getting into trouble, they went to Enoch and they asked God, said, "Hey, look, we know that we're screwed. We understand what we did was wrong, but at least, take care of our kids. Can they go back home?" And God said, "Nope, they can't." And so as soon as he told them, "You will see your own offspring killed by man." So humans killed off the giants, But see, since their souls can't go back to heaven, they're the ones that are roaming the earth from the beginning to this day. And so for them to have an influence on this land, they have to have an influence on people who can interact in this realm. And the only ones who have the right to interact in this realm is us. Which is why Jesus had to be born here, because he had, in order to be able to have the influence, he had to live this entire reality. He couldn't just pop in, say, hi, I'm here, and this is what you got to do, and then pop out. That's or coming in from a future time frame, which we'll be able to do soon. Going into the past and going, hey, look, you should be doing this and that because we want to adjust the future. That's not the legitimate way of going into a time. The legitimate legal way is being born into it.
By the story of him going into time, he had to have known going into it that there was going to be no living through this. It was to show humanity how they had gotten.
He knew, and he told everybody his entire life that he was going to die, that he would be the sacrifice, he would be the payment. He was well aware of that at the creation of the universe, because his father told him, look, son, you want these people to have free will? It's going to cost you. This is going to be the price. And in the end, when he was in his human flesh and he knew that time was near, he kneeled down, and they say it's written, he cried tears of blood. Because imagine the agony of knowing what's going to be going on. And he implored, is there any other way for this to be done? But at the end, he subjected himself to God's rule. And he gave up his own life, because only he had the power to do that and to take it up again. So he knew that from the very beginning, and he's had to do it many, many times. For our race, once. But he's had to go to other flocks, to other places, to help enlighten them, to show them the true way of compassion, of forgiveness.
This gets back to the question I was going to ask you, and that I did ask you. Do you think Jesus has been to multiple places, or do you think God has one begotten Son that he has for each significant beings?
He is the only begotten Son. Now, if he is incarnated in different entities, not on the same planet, because his message is going to be done once on each planet, because there's a timeline. Each one has their own.
Unless it's a positive one where he's not put to death.
There isn't one to where he won't be put to death.
It all has to do with a sacrifice, and there's not any good beings in this universe?
Because we have free will. The simple fact that we have free will means that once we deviated from God's command. And if we deviate once from God's command, the punishment is death.
Well, if we're all created in God's image, how is it that none of us have ever gotten to that point where we actually succeeded in being close to his image?
I wouldn't say that none have gotten close, because we've got Moses as an example, but even he failed. We've got David, but in the end, he started getting down into his own carnal desires. We've got Enoch, the seventh from Adam, who walked with God. We have Seth, who was one of Noah's sons, who ended up, going on. Actually, now I'm getting them confused, because Adam had another one after Abel, and that's where the line ended up going on. But there are lots of details about that section of humanity that we aren't aware of, and I've been studying a lot of different perspectives and shows and everything else to try and figure out. Some resonate with me, some don't. I used to like the Ancient Aliens in the beginning, because I remember visiting the pyramids in Mexico and everything else, and seeing that and knowing that aliens existed, because I know the people have visited us in the past. The Nazca lines, and you see all the different things that could not be done in Peru. You see these stones cut with the laser-like precision for tens of feet, dozens of feet. And even modern equipment can't do what was done on these stones. And so
I don't necessarily have to attribute it to aliens. I think
that's antediluvian structure. So the technology that they had before God destroyed everything was very advanced.
well, and that's more my understanding of it. Is I like the Graham Hancock interpretation of it, where
Oh yeah,
I do believe
I like Graham Hancock a lot.
we are conscious. I mean, we are a civilization with amnesia. We don't know about our past civilizations that got us to this point.
We don't even know
And
the cycles. The Mayans told us that we're on the 5th cycle.
I mean, the Mayan calendar is very often misinterpreted, to say the least.
We're running right along with it.
But
I've
no,
told you
the understanding of it. Then why did we think the world was going to end in 2012?
it did.
It's a restart of the cycle. The world itself didn't end. It's a restart of the cycle.
Okay. But hold on. Let me unpack this a little bit for you. They saw the universe in 25,000 year cycles, and some of the progression of the planet and that it spins around in perihelion or whatever. But they saw it as 25,000 year cycles. Okay.
Pause on that. Just their knowledge of how long these cycles were, doesn't that alone talk about how Christianity, like the earth is more than 2,000 years old, and it's not a
6,000. But yeah, we'll get to that. It's 6 days. Now, what is a day? Okay. That's the whole crux of the question as well. And Jesus once said that 1,000 years is as a day, and a day is as 1,000 years. Why? Because time time isn't the way we see it. That's a whole another thing. But what the Mayans were saying, we were on
that right there is why I have the most problem with like people like Ken Ham. He runs a museum in the U.S. Explaining Christianity to people, and he was saying that like older trees than what we have known to be how long the earth was here were just placed here by God, and you were just supposed to take them as they were. You weren't supposed to actually count their rings and know how old they actually were. They were just placed here by God the same time you were. And
don't pay attention to science, and that's where we get the idea of Christians being ignorant, which is the reason why I started my channel with scientific principles. Because I'm starting my book. The basic idea of my book is that I start from the Big Bang, and I go through to modern man and how we interact, our position in this holographic multiverse, and how we can interact in a better form with others. Okay, which is the whole purpose of the thing. I mean, all these. I had a uncle of mine that used to tell me, "Yeah, you're so into aliens and everything else. How does that change my life?" More interesting would be if you could figure out how they went from there to here, and if you can figure out that form of propulsion, that would be interesting. Otherwise, it's not worth studying. And that's what he used to tell me. And it's like, yeah, that's so narrow-minded, but at the same time, he's right. Well, studying about all these things, and
it's that why that drives us, like you were talking about. It's that why that drives us. I mean, just because he doesn't have the same passion about that why as you do, doesn't mean yours is any less valid.
But see, like the Dr. Ham that you mentioned, I don't want to seem as someone who is oblivious to science, that I don't believe in anything that Newton said or Einstein or any of these people. I studied physics for years, man. I love that shit. I was making holograms when I was 17. I love that shit. Now, the thing that bothered me about scientists is they're trying to eliminate the gods of the For example, the Mayans would have a harvest god or a rain god or a war god and all that kind of stuff. And they wanted to replace those beliefs with something tangible, physical, the mechanism of the universe, right? So the objective of scientists was to eliminate the plethora of gods that people associated to things that were, they wanted to be able to understand those things other than, oh, some god did that. Why does the sun rise in the morning? Oh, because that's, somebody pulling a chariot and they've got the horse. The Mayans, oh, it's a battle between one brother and the other, and half the day one brother wins and half the day the other brother wins. And so when the good brother wins, it's daytime, and when the dark brother is winning, it's nighttime. That's sort of a superficial understanding of it. Now, it's much more interesting whenever we understand that the entire dynamics of a rotating sphere and discs, but they're not discs. We're flying through the air. The sun is flying through the air and it's spinning, is creating a vortex, and we're all in the vortex floating behind it. Okay. But if you look at it from one perspective, it looks like a discs of concentric rings. Okay. But it's really a vortex, pulling everything behind it. Now, God told us, God told Job, he wrote, "Where were you when I put the foundations of the earth? When I hung the sphere on nothing?" He told us, one, the world isn't flat, it's a sphere. Okay, he said that in Job. So flat earthers can kiss my ass.
Well,
Two,
they also in the Old Testament, they also said in the Old Testament that it was a flat surface on pillars that can also be interpreted as a flat earth.
That's more of a Greek interpretation of things. The Greeks thought that the flat world was supported by four turtles. Like the swimming turtles in the ocean, these were turtles that floated through space and they held the planar earth on their backs. That's a Greek view, okay? And that's not biblical. In the Bible, it's a sphere hung on nothing. It's not supported by anything. It's hung on nothing, okay? Which is one perspective of the reality that we have. Now, I always tried to study science as to how God did what he did. And so that's where I've gotten into the multiverse and everything else, because that helps explain a lot more why our thought patterns and processes are important. Because Jesus says that we sin against him in thought, word, and deed. It's not just the things that we do in this world. It's the way we think about it. It's the things that we say, because all of those can have an influence. And if you understand the multiverse, you understand that somebody's words can influence the actions of somebody else that can make them spin off into another multiverse that they wouldn't have spun off into before that influence. And in that aspect, words have tremendous power whenever you're talking about the multiverse. Because if you don't have negative thoughts, then you reduce the probabilities of that reality becoming true. The more you focus on a thought, the more probable it will become true. The more you focus on something, you'll eventually speak about it. And when you speak about it, others will combine their energy to help you make that original thought a reality. So once we run into that and we make that reality, we're creating our own multiverse at that point. Okay, because we could have gone left, but instead of going left, we went right. So all the decisions from that point forward are another reality that wouldn't have happened if we had gone left. Because going left would have had, this possibility and the other possibility and the other probability associated to it. When we don't go left and we go right, well, all those possibilities are reduced, not nullified, because you can always make a U-turn and go that direction later on. And so those probabilities still exist. But if you don't think about that and you don't go in that direction, then that's the wolf that we feed less. The wolf that we feed more is the probability that the multiverse that we choose to be our own expression in this particular aspect of our dimensionality. But he wants the best option for all of us. And for that, he wants us to go along that best path that leads us to the destiny for which we were born for. Because we're all born for a reason, to do specific things. Whether we do them or not is our choice, because after all, it's free will. God would like us to do that.
I don't even necessarily think God has to be just brought back to the Big Bang. So
Oh,
with
he's interactive in all instances. I mean, you
well,
yourself
and
mentioned that
so
you felt the
I
spirit
could
move on
almost
you.
I feel like he's almost brought back to a further point than that. So my theory on the universe, which doesn't necessarily count out a religious or godly power, is the fact that I think on the opposite end of every converging black hole in the universe is a white fountain, its own Big Bang. But something had to spark these into creation.
Yeah.
Something made all of this happen at some point. But I do feel like universes are created and destroyed at all different times, and I think that's something we see now according to science, is that
That's quantum
all
theory.
yeah, all of the black holes eventually converge into one, and eventually all the matter will be sucked out of a universe. But I feel like it has to be spat out somewhere else, and I don't necessarily that think that that couldn't be interpreted as a Big Bang if
Well,
if you
we
were
see it as Big Bang because the acceleration that was endemic in it is what we consider as the bang.
well, and
You might be right.
we can't fathom the vacuum of space of a black hole. So I could understand that we not understand the impact pushed out of the other end. If you're thinking of it like a tube, if you're thinking of it, I mean, this is all theory, of course.
Yeah,
I
because
don't.
even well, the physicists don't believe that there's a possibility of a wormhole of a singularity. They believe that it goes to some other point in this own universe. It could go to other dimensions. We don't know. Hawking believed that it all just condensed into one finite point, and kept condensing, and the information in that was stored. Three-dimensional information was stored in a two-dimensional layer on the outside of the black hole, so that the law of energy isn't destroyed. You can't destroy energy. Energy is neither created nor destroyed. Um, Bizarre little concepts, but they got their own little rules. So yeah, black holes are interesting, and they're conundrums, and they're things that we can play theoretically with. Um, but again, how does that help me interact with somebody tomorrow? Because that's I've gone down so many of these damn rabbit holes. I've
I
wasted
think
my
it helps.
entire life around rabbit holes, but how
I
are
think
they useful in the end?
it's always shown us in history that we put religion at the farthest point of science, and I think it's a initiative of religion to not say that this is the set point of God is at this, that he's at the Big Bang. We've decided this is where science can't go past, and so that's where religion starts. I don't think that's necessarily the way to do
That's a
things.
human interpretation of it, and our human
Oh, I
interpretation
agree.
of it is limited by what we know, and they don't
No,
know
yeah,
everything.
but I don't feel like we have to necessarily put God at that end point. We can put him at a farther point than that. God is what initiated all of this,
But he's
whether
but
it was
he's
the Big Bang
yeah,
or the
but
things that
he's
led
not
to the Big
absent
Bang.
from creation. He
No,
started
not
it,
at all.
but
He'd re-
he's Alpha and
he can
Omega,
still
which
be
means he's
he
there
can
at the
still
end
be
as well, and he's here throughout.
responsible for it without being named in the earliest links of the creation. He can be like, "Oh, he's the one that initiated it and carried it out." But we shouldn't necessarily pinpoint where we think he initiated it, because it could
We don't
be an
even know.
earlier than that, because we don't know.
This could be the fifth incarnation of the human experiment. We could be, in a ever repeating cycle of, for example, physicists in the beginning of the 20th century didn't know whether the universe was expanding. Well, Einstein believed that it was static. Everything was where it was, and that sort of thing. Makes it easier for creation. But later on, they found out, couple of dozen years after that, that it was expanding, because before they had okay, it's expanding, but how fast is it expanding? Will gravity eventually make it fall back in on itself? because it's expanding from the original Big Bang. And eventually, is it slowing down? Is that expansion slowing down to where it eventually go back to from the Big Bang to the Big Crunch? Or like Stephen Hawking believed, that we'll keep expanding until everything goes dark, because the light will run out. We'll keep expanding, but there won't be any stars or anything else, because everything through entropy will devolve into general nothingness. The stars will burn out, and everything else, and it'll just be an entire universe of expanding black holes. Those extremes we don't know about, and in reality, that's not where God lives. God doesn't live where we can't explain him.
Don't you think we limit God by putting him at specific points?
We want to eliminate him from our lives, which is why we do that, because we want to be responsible for our lives. We don't want to have somebody else judging us and telling us that me smoking a pack of cigarettes a day isn't a good thing. I don't want to hear that. I want to hear that I'm going to live forever the more cigarettes I smoke. You know, I don't want to hear that drinking too much beer is going to give me problems in my liver or something. I don't want to hear that. I want to hear that, you know, being drunk is a good thing. He doesn't tell us what we want to hear. He tells us what we need to hear. And because we're spoiled little brats, we close the door and we push him out because we don't want to hear it. But that's what makes us spoiled little brats, and that's what makes us continue to grow as a spoiled brat society, because we're getting what we want, and we're going to do what we want, hell or high water. Well, guess what? We're going to get both, hell and high water, unless we do what he wants, which is to love one another. It's not complicated. It's not a tough law. Be loving, period. And wise. And having kids is part of, you know, the reason why we're here, procreation. It's part of why the adversary was so enthralled with humanity, because, hey, we procreate. What's that? Ooh, cool. Yeah, let's do that. Because they don't procreate, because they're immortal beings, or were anyway, until they did that stupid shit. Now they're very mortal. And their life is dependent on the human sequence, the human experiment. Because when God is waiting for the very last person to believe, at that point, it'll just be continually negative and bad. And why does God allow this to continue? Because somebody will believe. And until that last person that is to believe does believe, then God says, okay, good, job done. I'm not going to lose one of my children. And I'll let the universe and the earth continue to do what they're doing, because I know that down there's one, there's another 2 over there, there's another 4 over there. I'm not going to give up any of those. And I'm not going to call an end to this entire experiment because it's just too bad. No, I want those guys. And when those guys at the end finally go, Yahweh, Jesus, thank you for paying my debt, for allowing me to be me and allowing me to be more like you. When the last person decides that, God says, all right, let's wrap it up. We got 7 trumpets and 7 bowls of wrath and all kinds of stuff that's going to be going on at the end to tell people, look, I'm the guy who did this. I'm the guy who's calling the shots. I let y'all play around for a while, but enough's enough. No more. And that time's coming. It's coming. Because we are living in an upside down world, man. 2020 has been clown world. And that gets me back to the Mayans, because their 25,000 year cycle ended in 2012. The next 25,000 year cycle was going to start, but not immediately afterwards. There's a transition period, because it's not one spoke going on to another spoke. It's one spoke going on to a possible 2 spokes. Which one of those spokes do we choose? If humanity chooses the wrong spoke, we won't survive the 25,000 year cycle. We'll kill ourselves or we'll die or whatever before the 25,000 years is up. And evidently we are on the 5th cycle. Now we're starting the 6th cycle. So what they were saying is there's a transition period to where humanity would choose good path versus bad path, depending on which of those spokes humanity chose to engage in. And the crux of the majority of those was going to be between 2014 and 2016. But that period of transition between one spoke and the other spoke was between 2012 and 2019. That was what they specifically wrote. Now, the year after 2019 is which year?
2020.
Yeah. 2020 was just like every other year that we've lived, isn't it? Just like it. Life changed. We got Bitcoin, cryptocurrency, digital currency to where we can track, trace, and do anything on the planet. We've got a virus that is making sure that everybody stays home, that now everybody's so afraid that they have to follow the edicts of some central government that never had power over their lives before, because the government was never as powerful as what it is now. Okay, life is completely different now than what it was in 2019, which is completely different than what it was in 2012. 2012 was the end of a lifestyle, of a way of humanity interacting with the planet. After that, it's a whole new ballgame. And we're talking about, artificial intelligence. We're talking about Neuralink, us being connected to the artificial intelligence. We're talking about satellites around the entire planet. We're talking about being able to communicate between two continents. I'm in Brazil, you're in Illinois. I mean, holy fuck. And we've been having a conversation for 2+ hours. At what point in any time in history was that even possible? It wasn't. With a new cycle, it is. Now, my preoccupation is, did we choose well or did we choose bad? Now, we voted Trump and we voted independence and we voted freedom. So I believe we chose well, because the ones who want to destroy us are the ones who are screaming and fighting and doing everything they can to get it's a spoiled child not getting what they want. And they're putting up the temper tantrum to try and get what they want. And what they want is that lower spoke, the spoke where we're destroyed, where we're indentured to them, to where we're slaves, to where we are worthless beings to be done with what they choose. That's the spoiled children are fighting to gain. And through the Great Awakening, we are going, you know what? Nah, I don't agree with that. And I want this other spoke. And so the majority of humanity is choosing that freedom. And we're seeing that in the protests throughout the world nowadays. We're choosing the freedom. Okay. The problem is that God told us how this spoke was going to end. That's why we're close. It's not because the Mayans said it. They saw things that were in essence. Okay. But, shit's about to get real. Real. Okay. Like that question that you have about the serpent. What if there are images of an 8-foot snake with legs and arms? Would that make you rethink the snake in the Garden of Eden? If you knew that the guy looks like a king cobra with the big old cape over the back, which explains also why the pharaohs dressed that way. Okay. Shit's about to get real. And the stuff that we believed in that wasn't possible, that wasn't true, that's all, because it makes life more comfortable. Life is going to become very much uncomfortable when we understand the importance of our interactions with each individual in existence. Because our interaction is what feeds the probability of multiverses. And the more concise we are, the stronger the probability for one outcome to that multiverse. It's like the random number generators that they have going around in different places. they've found out that in mass events like on September 11th and during like Super Bowl games, towards most people that are focused on that one thing, the random generators stop generating random numbers because humanity takes the randomness out of existence. Because our collective consciousness takes us in one specific direction, eliminating all others. That is what everybody being in sync does. Everybody being on the same page eliminates the possibilities, the smaller probabilities. It strengthens that one final result that can be beneficial for most. That's what we usually try and hunger for and go after. That's why teamwork supposedly works. That's why we have the phrase, everybody has to be on the same page. That's from music. If they're playing different notes, even if it's from the same music, but they're in different times, that sounds like shit, because I was also in band. So if you're everybody's got to be playing the same note, same beat, same time in order for it to be music. If each one's playing whatever they want to do, it's not music, it's chaos, cacophony. Okay. The same thing goes with what we do in our day to day. If everybody's doing their thing, then nothing gets done. But if people decide, you know what, this is the direction we want to go, this is what we want to do. Yeah, I can do my part over here. Yeah, I this part of it, yeah, I can do that. Yeah, oh, that sounds good. Yeah, that's better than what I'm doing now. I'll do that. And everybody's working in the same direction towards the same goal, then anything can happen. And God tells us that. But
Yeah, that's probably a good note to wrap it up on, Mike.
yeah, it's 2 hours. It took me 2 hours to actually run out of things to say.
I got plenty more to say. I want to talk to you about a lot more, but I feel like it's a good wrap up point.
All right, perfect. So thank you very much, Jake, for the invite. That was wonderful, and we'll do this again, definitely.
Oh yeah, we got to start setting it up. We'll I don't know if we're gonna do it every Thursday or once a week at the same time, or how we want to do
Thursdays,
it.
I usually have soccer sometimes, but Fridays or Saturdays are definitely good for me. Or some other day of the week as well. Either I've got soccer on Monday and Thursday, but like today I didn't go play because to me this is more interesting. I'm getting a bit too old to be running around, but still, yeah, we'll do that, and we'll let everybody know where we're going to be. Hold on.
Yeah, we'll start sharing it and getting our live set up so that people can get in here and comment. This time I shared the Zoom link. I'll keep doing that as well. They can do that as well, and we'll set it up so that more people can get involved.
Find us, definitely.